we're with Vanessa Robledo, CEO of Sueño Winery in Napa, but really CEO of all wine country in one way or another. For the past 20 years, you've been in the wine industry, and you've been a CEO at least 2 times?
I was president once and CEO twice.
I mean, how is it that your career is such that you always gravitate right to the top of the game?
Well, I began working in the wine industry as a little girl.
Yeah.
So my first job was working in the vineyards in my family's, along with my 7 brothers and my sister. So all 9 children started in the family vineyards, and then worked my way up with wanting to really learn about the business through my father.
And your father founded Robledo Family Winery.
Yes, my parents founded
together. Yeah. Did you know that this would be your life, or was it just something that you were going to do for a while as part of the family?
I did not know it was my life, but as a daughter of immigrants, you take on a lot of responsibility at a young age, and so at that time, all I wanted to do was help my family. And both of my parents, my dad speaks English but with an accent, and he was always embarrassed about it, so he'd take me along so I can translate for him.
Interesting.
And so that's how I learned about the business.
And why you out of all the 9 kids?
Because I always wanted to be like my dad, and I'd kind of follow him around and I'd offer to do it, and my siblings were kind of shy and they didn't like doing that, so he would just say, "Okay, Vanessa, let's go. Let's go to this business meeting and that business meeting," and that's kind of how I got started.
And so it's not just the wine industry, but it's business and the protocols of business itself that you sort of got steeped in at an early age.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's something that I feel I've always loved.
Yeah.
I remember seeing my dad coming home with his briefcase and saying, "That's what I want. That's what I want to be able to do." And also just being good with numbers. I've always been good with numbers, and also just knowing that for some people like my family who've worked very hard from the bottom up, there's no option for failure for us. I mean, we started with nothing, and we wanted to grow into something, into a business that would thrive, where we would be able to support ourselves. And so it was kind of, failure was no option for us.
Right.
So I always had that in my mind, and making sure that all the decisions that were made were good business decisions for the family.
Did you feel that you put a lot of pressure on yourself as a kid in that context?
Yeah, I think I grew up very quickly. I've always been very mature, and I think a lot of people don't understand that part of it, and I think it goes back again to being children of immigrants.
Right.
You really grow, you grow up at a very young age because you take on adult responsibilities.
Yeah, there seems to be I'm sure there's social studies about first generation children and how they often are driven towards success because they've seen both worlds. And
right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't your father part of the Bracero movement?
My great-grandfather and my grandfather.
Right, because there's no way he'd be that old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have a tradition in your family that goes all the way back, right?
Yeah.
And now you're continuing it. But now you're continuing it from this business standpoint as a CEO for other companies. Now, you were the president of Robledo for a while.
Yes.
Can I ask why you're not with that family business and now with another?
Sure. I really wanted to create something on my own. I wanted to become independent from my family. And in my family, they're very traditional people. For example, everywhere I traveled on business trips, I was escorted by 2 of my brothers. Especially in New York, my dad thought that was such a dangerous city, so in New York City, I'd have to go with 2 of them, and then Florida, he'd only send 1, and then
so you had these,
Texas.
These bodyguards, basically.
Right, and it was, and I loved the culture. It was, it was very traditional as a woman. It was interesting because a role in business in my family, I was one of the first to be in that role. And so they trusted my business instincts and the business decisions that I made. But when it came to certain traditional things like traveling alone as a woman, that wasn't allowed. And there was things like that where I wanted to grow beyond that. I thought that it was important that once the family winery was successful, that I created something for myself and for my own name. And I remember my father telling me, why would you do that? You'll be taken care of for the rest of your life here.
Right, taken care of though.
Right.
Right.
And I said, that's not what I want. I want to build something for myself. I want to pave the own way for myself, and did what you did, Dad. So that's kind of how I would talk to him. And to this day, he's always had a hard time that I left the family winery, but I know he respects me.
Right. And we should say you left the family winery, not the family.
Right.
Two different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think other children of immigrants from the similar culture have to deal with this kind of stuff, like sort of identify themselves autonomous from the family and breaking out of cultural traditions that may not work with where they want to be in their lives?
I think so, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard, because when you come from a place like our family comes from Mexico, and they already have very traditional beliefs, and one of the few things that they bring with them, because they come from nothing, I mean, in their villages that they're from, or pueblos that they're from in Mexico, what they can bring with them is a language, their tradition, and their culture.
Right,
So when they come here,
yeah.
exactly, they hold on to that. And when there's changes, American culture is so different, it's so opposite, that they have a hard time letting go of certain things.
Right.
And I was born in Sonoma, so I was raised here, and I lived in two different worlds.
Yeah.
Home, it was Mexico, and outside going to school was America.
Right.
So I always try to balance the both, but I knew for myself, I always felt, more American, but I did love my traditions of Mexico. So it was just about balancing that. As a woman, I felt there's no limits for me. I liked, the fact that when I went to school and we all ate together, at home we first serve my brothers and then we eat,
Really?
So it's different. So it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, it's equal here, So that's some of the things that I noticed that I appreciate and were hard for my parents, like even the language. My mom never learned English.
Really?
To this day. So there's certain things that they just, want to keep the same.
Yeah.
It's hard for them.
Have you integrated both of your lives, into your work? It seems that a lot of mi sueño, right?
Yes.
In Spanish, is that something that you bring to your work? It's like the understanding of two cultures.
Well, the beautiful thing of Mi Sueño was founded by two very special people to me, Lorena, my sister, and Rolando, her husband. Rolando was a winemaker for Robledo Family Winery when we founded it in 1997. They founded Mi Sueño at the same time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So Mi Sueño means my dream, and really what they've integrated is also the cultures and the traditions, which is something that I love. And I wanted to take a step further, where my specialty is pairing Latin food with wine. So at Mi Sueño, those are some of the things we're implementing in all of the events, but also having an appreciation for the culture. And for example, we just celebrated Primavera en Mi Sueño, which means spring. It's a new beginning, showing, it was an event that was to help the community. So it was a really special thing for us to do, but when they came there, it was almost like going to Little Mexico, because we had some of my mother's recipes were being served, and a lot of special connections with food and wine. So both cultures were present at that event.
That's great. Let's pick up on that when we come back. We're talking with Vanessa Robledo. She's the CEO of Mi Sueño Winery, and we'll be right back. And we're back with Vanessa Robledo. She's the CEO of Mi Sueño Winery in Napa. We're talking about food and wine pairing, and how one of your missions is to pair Latin food with the wine you guys are making. How important is wine and food pairing just in general into how we enjoy wine and probably our food, right?
It's an experience. It's if you do it right, it would be an amazing experience.
What if you do it wrong? It's just
it's an okay experience.
Right.
But for example, I remember when I first started selling wine, and they'd say, "Why are you pairing Latin food with wine? It goes with beer and tequila." But In fact, I knew it didn't. I knew there was more to Latin food, especially sometimes modifying the dishes.
So what was it? Was it like a prejudice they had against Latin food and wine? Like wine is a European paired phenomenon?
Well, yeah, but they would say it's the spice of the food. It's also the texture of the Latin food that doesn't go with wine. But in reality, if you do it right, the acidity of certain wines like a Sauvignon Blanc or like a Chardonnay balance the spices really beautifully.
Yeah.
For example, enchilada drenched in tomatillo sauce, paired with a Chardonnay. It just, because of the little spice there, it refreshes your palate when you're drinking it with a wine.
I can see that in a Chardonnay, it's got kind of a rounder taste, sort of that buttery, or if not, if it's a leaner one, either way, it's neutralizing. I can see that. And you see this is a trend that's happening everywhere, like Indian food paired with wine and that kind of thing. Why do you think it took so long for everyone to get over the hump and realize that it's not just beer and tequila?
Well, I think it's it's the culture. They believe, they assume that in Mexico that's what they do. When they go over there, sometimes that's what
they
certain
see.
People, what they see.
'Cause that's what they're served because they're tourists.
Right. So, but it's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything compare with wine, as long as it's about also adapting the flavors in the food to pair with the wine better, or selecting the right wine that's going to go with that food. It's all a balancing act.
And so you're taking your mother's recipes and modify them with the wine that your sister and brother-in-law are making, and so it sounds like a perfect match altogether.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, I love doing that. And what we do is we have a kind of an event at my mom's, and she cooks up a storm, and I bring the wine and we pair it, and it's just great.
That's great. Have you ever gone to the winemaker though and said, you have to change the wine to better match this particular recipe?
Well, the magic thing about wine is that 80% of the quality of wine is in the vineyards.
Yeah.
So I'd have to talk to Mother Nature.
If you weren't doing this, if you weren't pursuing wine, if you'd grown up in a different context, what do you think you'd be doing?
I always thought I'd be a lawyer.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, you still could be a lawyer.
I still could be, yeah.
Do you think about that?
I do. I often think about going back to school and becoming a lawyer. I'm just having too much fun.
Yeah. It's just your whole career, if not life, has been involved with wine and wine culture. Mm-hmm. Do you feel you were trapped by that in a way, or do you feel that you're just lucky that way?
Yeah, well, I feel very fortunate because in what I do, I honor my ancestors and my family every day.
Right.
So to me, what's been more important is for Latinos in general to be seen in a light that's not just working in the vineyards or in the back of the kitchen or cleaning rooms, because we can do anything and achieve anything, whether we're women, whether we're men. And, it just really doesn't matter. It really depends on what we want for ourselves. And I think that my ancestors worked really hard to be able to build and open doors for us.
Right.
And they achieved it, and I'm thankful for them. And I work in the vineyards today because I want still that connection with my ancestors. I never look down on the vineyard work or any of the labor that was done of the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm always proud of that part of my life. So it keeps me grounded, it keeps me connected to nature, and I love doing the work more than ever. Now that even though it doesn't matter what my title is, that work is the most important work I can possibly do, is the work in the vineyards.
Do you feel like you're a role model?
I've always wanted to be a good role model for one person in my life that's been, important, which is my daughter.
Yeah.
But I don't see myself like, but I've heard people tell me that I am.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for that. I'm humbled when they tell me that. But for me, it's always been important, like, how can I inspire my daughter to know that as a young woman, she can achieve anything?
And I would imagine you're raising her differently than you were raised.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Very differently.
But I mean, do you feel like that you are, like, people look to you for as a role model, as somebody who's achieved what you have? And I read in your bio here, you're sort of like the embodiment of the American dream in some ways. That seems like a lot of responsibility. Do you become overwhelmed with people's perceptions of you like that, or is that something you embrace?
Yeah, I don't. I do embrace who I am.
Yeah.
I don't have too many people telling me, that, but I have heard it.
Yeah.
And I respect people's opinions. It's hard for me to feel certain pressure because I grew up with so much pressure.
Right. Right.
That now it's almost like it's smooth sailing for me, because my whole life I've never not worked. I've worked as a little girl. I just never stopped.
Yeah.
And so now that when I'm working, I'm in a state of mind where it's a passion, it's a love. It's like not even working.
Yeah.
So that's
Is that the secret of your success? And is that something other people should do? Is find the passion in their work and let that drive them, versus just doing what John does and phoning in the job?
Yeah, I think definitely it definitely for me has taken a long time to. It's not something I've always felt. I felt before it was my responsibility and I had to do it.
Right.
Because people were relying on me to do it, and now I really feel like there's an art to it.
Right.
And I look on that piece that I love to do, which really involves meeting people. The people that I've met is probably my favorite thing of the wine industry.
Yeah.
And also working with the land. Those are the two of the most things that I love about the wine industry.
Are there people that you turn to as mentors or role models for you that sort of help bring you to this idea of that there is an art to it, and that it isn't just your responsibility, it's just something that you can do as a passion?
Yeah, well, my grandfather,
Yeah.
he taught me that the vines are connected to us, because he would tell me stories of how the vines were like a woman's body,
Mm-hmm.
and how the maturity of the grape was almost like a pregnancy. And by the time bud break to harvest, it's almost 9 months away.
Oh, really?
So when we bring in the harvest, it's like bringing in, a new child.
And then you crush it.
And then you crush it. But it's beyond the crushing, because
Right.
the wine develops and ages, also. So it goes on. And the fact that the wine brings pleasure to so many people,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we were talking about food and wine, it's just such a magical thing. That's how I see it. That's how, for me, that's what it's important. It's, it's the grape growing part of it and how it all evolves in the vineyard, but then you have the winemaking process also. And that's what makes it so special and such a gift every day for me to work in this business.
We're talking with Vanessa Robledo. She's the CEO of Mi Sueño Winery. We'll be right back. And we're back with Vanessa Robledo. She's the CEO of Mi Sueño Winery, and we were touching upon the process of winemaking, or the life cycle of a wine, from vineyard to the winemaking to the bottling. But then this whole other thing occurs, which is the marketing of the wine and the building of the brand, which you're an expert at. How do you make your wines stand out? What is the secret ingredient, besides just you, that makes your brands work?
I think a lot of it is connecting the brand with people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's always been the storytelling of what my family story was. I didn't care who I was in front of. I would always talk about the story,
Right.
and talk about why it was so special, our family story, and also the humble beginnings, how we started from nothing. Was the angle that I took for building the first wine brand, which is
Yeah.
Robledo.
And you were keenly aware of that process. I mean, did you study
No,
branding?
I didn't actually.
Really?
I didn't at the time.
Because that story is everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, everyone knows that story. Yeah.
Right. Well, at the beginning, I only did it because I was so proud of my family. So I did it. I would just, whoever would listen, I would tell them the story,
Yeah.
and they would repeat it. And then we started having people interested in articles, and people wanted to do TV interviews.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know if our viewers know, you've been everywhere. You've been on national television, you've been in national magazines. I mean, you've really made this work, you know, in a very, you really put the spotlight, not just on the family wine, but Sonoma County wines and now Napa wines. But you did this instinctively, it sounds like.
Well, at the beginning, I didn't. At the beginning, it was just something that came, you know, what I thought I needed to do is get the story out there.
Oh, that's what I mean. Like you were just telling the story, but
right.
But when did you bring the art of it into it? Like when you understood how to manipulate the story and the brand to best effect.
Well,
and I mean manipulate not in a bad way. I mean, like, you know, like,
yeah. Well, I think it had a mind of its own. It evolved on its own. It was just something that, you know, because I was so passionate, and I didn't do it on my own. I mean, I did it with my family.
Right.
My family also, you know, they contributed their expertise, which is a variation because we're such a huge family. And then my mom coming in with her cooking, you know, that was such an important part of the whole development of that brand, was her cooking and the fact that people loved what she was creating.
Right.
And then we were pairing it with the wines that our family was making. So that was just a very special thing that just elevated the brand very, very quickly.
Right. And then you launched a new brand, right, from scratch.
Actually, are we talking about the Black Coyote?
Yeah.
The Black Coyote was already established,
okay,
but nobody had heard of it.
Okay.
So what I did with that brand is the same thing. We really focused on growing the direct-to-consumer side of the brand, and it was 600 cases. We grew it to about 900 cases, but we sold out.
That's great.
You know, it was a wine that was over $100 a bottle, Cabernet.
A Napa Cab at that.
Napa
like
Valley Cab.
Big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went from representing the family winery to a premium high-end brand.
Yeah.
Which before I had variation of prices. Now I only had, you know, one price. And so it was very interesting. And it was when the economy went down 2008. So I basically just started calling a bunch of people. I mean, I was not going to fail. I always wanted to find ways of what I needed to do to make sure that we succeeded in business.
And when you're not succeeding in business, you also work with charities.
Yeah, I like to do a lot of community service.
Where do you find the time?
Well, lately it's been challenging because my daughter's going to college.
What, really?
Yeah. So lately I've kind of pulled away from a lot of it, only because I want to spend all my extra time with her.
Yeah.
And she's graduating in a couple months.
Oh, congrats! Yeah.
So that's a big deal for me. So all my spare time is now focused on her.
And then what were you doing with the charities?
So the different things, like for example, locally here in Sonoma, I think it was 2011 and 2012. We created a preschool. There was already one that the state had established that they launched, but we worked to launch another one. And so they had one in the morning and then one in the afternoon.
And this is in Sonoma?
Sonoma Valley, El Verano Elementary School.
Okay.
And the purpose for this is that a lot of these kids didn't have money to go to elementary school. So once they started kindergarten, they were so behind.
Oh, I see.
And most of these kids were Spanish, you know, they didn't speak any English.
You mean they didn't have money for preschool before elementary school?
They didn't have, they didn't have any money for preschool.
Wow, okay.
So culturally, there was a shock when they started. And nowadays, you go into a classroom, most of them speak Spanish, so they speak Spanish to each other. And so there's a lot of, you know, where they are getting set behind. Versus when I was in school, it was my brother and I, so we picked it up really quick.
Right.
A lot of things have changed, and we have to be aware of all of the changes that are happening in our school system. And also the fact that you saw these kids evolving from the first time I went to even the second month. They were totally different kids.
Right.
They were already assimilating into the culture. They were counting. They were saying colors. Their English, you know, they were picking up words in English. So preschool is such a key part of education, you know, especially now with everything that's going on in the school system, where kids are just falling through the cracks and they're just pushing them on through the system. And to start in the very beginning of their learning stage is so important.
Yeah.
So I found it to be very successful. After that, we had local leaders who took it on, and they opened, I think, one other one. So they took that one on, and then another one that they opened, which I thought was remarkable. I mean, we have such a giving community. It's really wonderful to be part of it.
That's one thing about Sonoma. Yeah, it's very generous
Yes.
there. Vineyard Worker's Daughter. That was your creation, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that?
So that was a marketing company that I started, and what it would I consulted for food and wine festivals.
Yeah.
So I worked for the Charles Schwab Cup Championship here in Sonoma locally. I was hired in East LA meets Napa, a wine tasting, food and wine pairing that they do in LA. And then in Mexico, San Miguel de Allende, they hired me for a festival that they did over there. So it was different. It was like still in food and wine, but I missed like walking the vineyards. I was traveling a lot. I was just working in the office a lot. And so it was different than what I was used to.
And now it seems like you're very happy with your work. And
I am. Mi Sueño is a wonderful winery. They've created a very successful brand there. And now we're really focusing on direct to consumer.
That's great. And what's next for you?
Well, I'm still really involved. I work with my mom. She has vineyards in Napa and Sonoma, and so I'm very involved with working with her. And I think, you know, once my daughter goes to college, I know that things are going to evolve into something else, but I'm not making any plans until all that happens. But yeah, I'm really excited to just do what I'm doing now with Mi Sueño and my mother's vineyard. It's Maria de la Luz Vineyards.
That's great. Well, we're talking with Vanessa Robledo from Mi Sueño. She's the CEO, and thank you so much for spending some time with us here. Come back sometime.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you.